Hi, I'm Asmo and today I have for you a beginner-friendly guide for the best way to level a Chaos Witch in Path of Exile 2. I leveled many characters this league looking for the right setup and optimizing this strategy to keep it simple for the new players while also maximizing the speed and damage at all stages of leveling from level 1 until maps. If you want to level a witch, I recommend you watch the entire video because I'll be sharing the gem progression, the gearing and crafting priorities, the passive tree, as well as gameplay tips that will make the game easier for you, and at the end I'll have an extra surprise for you as well. You don't need any gear or currency to follow this guide, and I'll be explaining how to progress quickly on a completely fresh start and start destroying the new Abyss mechanic as early as level 2 because this build is perfect for it. Your initial setup starts with engraving Contagion with your level 1 gem and Flame Wall with the other level 1 gem that you can find in Clearfell. You clear by casting Contagion on the lowest health monster and finishing them with Unearth. Continue using Unearth on the afflicted corpses of fallen monsters to raise the contagious scorpions that will carry and spread it to anything that they hit. You can create unending chains of contagious scorpions by just spamming Unearth in dense areas and during the Abyss encounters. For single target, if the boss has any monsters nearby, you can use Contagion and Unearth on them to bring a stacked Contagion and extra minions to that boss. Cast Contagion and Flame Wall on top of the boss and then spam your Chaos Bolt from the wand until you need to refresh the duration of the other two skills. After killing the Devourer and the Abyss located in the same zone as the Devourer, engrave level 2 Contagion, magnified area for the Contagion, and prolonged duration for the Unearth that will help you with clear. And after you kill the Ariadne for your next support gem, you want to engrave Unleash, and you'll need one Unleash for your Contagion and one for the Chaos Bolt. And at level 6, you will get the Essence Drain and drop the Flame Wall completely, and you can now clear in one of two ways. The first method is to Essence Drain first and then cast Contagion on the affected monsters. Contagion will prioritize them so it will be easier to aim, but if you have enough damage, the monsters will likely die before the Contagion affects them, preventing the spread. And if that's the case, then you use the second method, Contagion first and then Essence Drain on the affected monster. This will guarantee spreading the Contagion, but it will be harder to aim against monsters that move fast and block each other. So to help with that, you can use the Chain support on Essence Drain and Unleash support on the Contagion. You can still keep spamming Unearth on the Contagion afflicted corpses until you notice that the minions die too easily and are not useful anymore, which typically happens around Act 3. Your single target pattern with the Essence Drain is very simple. Just use the Essence Drain once on the target and then spam Chaos Bolt to keep as many Wither stacks on the target as you can. And then refresh the Essence Drain right before it expires and keep casting Chaos Bolt in between. From level 6, you are aiming for this setup. Chaos Bolt with Unleash and rapid casting. I see a lot of people recommend Withering Touch, but that literally doesn't work because your Chaos Bolt will not do enough damage to trigger it. Contagion with a magnified area for a bigger spread AoE and Unleash so that you can affect 3 targets at once. Unearth with prolonged duration so that the minions live longer. And then Essence Drain with Swift Affliction and Chain. And for single target, instead of Chain, you can swap in Zenith or Considered Casting once you get access to it. I usually do it on bosses to speed up the encounters since the build doesn't have great single target early. And lastly, you want to be using the Withering Presence with your first Spirit Gem with the prolonged duration support for longer Wither duration. At level 31, you will gain access to level 9 gems that will really improve your boss damage, the Despair Curse and the Dark Effigy Totem. So if you want to make the Jamanra fight at the end of Act 2 really easy, delay the fight by resetting Dreadnought until you are level 31 with both gems and level 30 flasks, and the fight will be much easier. From level 25 you can also find the Chiming Staff, which grants you the Sigil of Power skill. You can set your active skills to use only your main weapon set, and it will automatically swap the weapons to the staff whenever you cast the Sigil of Power and back to your regular set whenever you cast anything else. Your clearing pattern will be still the same with just Essence Drain and Contagion in whichever order works better for you, but your bossing will now get much more complicated complicated. The main idea is that you want to keep all of your skills up on the target at the same time, with Essence Drain being the most important. So on bosses, you want to start before the fight by casting the Sigil of Power and placing the Dark Effigy. Then, right before the boss becomes targetable, you cast Despair on it, and then once the boss spawns, you also cast your Essence Drain and Contagion and finish it off with a couple casts of Chaos Bolt to stack the Wither debuff. Keep refreshing the debuffs as the duration expires, and then throw in some Chaos Bolts in between to consistently keep up as many Wither stacks as you can and multiply your damage. The setup you're aiming for in the later acts is now this: Chaos Bolt with Unleash and Rapid Casting 2, Contagion with Magnified Area 2, Unleash and Intense Agony. I recommend using your first Gem Cutter's Prisms on the Contagion. If you get 4 of them on the Contagion, that will make it exactly the same as with Unleash permanently, so it will target 3 enemies by default, and you can replace the Unleash for some utility or damage, like for example Zenith, Acrimony or Chaotic Freeze. Then Essence Drain, you want to have Swift Affliction 2, Chain and either Considered Casting or Zenith, and then for bosses of course you could swap Chain for one of the damage supports, like having Considered Casting and Zenith together at the same time. Then for Despair, you want to use Heightened Curse, Decaying Hex and Prolonged Duration 2. You can either follow this list or use the Cursed Ground for easier pre-cast of your curse before the boss becomes targetable, but I personally find it better to time it correctly and then have a stronger and longer curse that affects the boss even if it moves around a lot. That's why I recommend Heightened Curse and Prolonged Duration, as well as the Decaying Hex for the extra debuff that will trigger for your Dark Effigy. And in Dark Effigy, you want to use Overabundance 2, Poison 2 and Concentrated Area. Dark Effigy deals more damage the more chaos damage over time effects exists on your target. And if you find the duration too short, you can replace the Overabundance with something like Controlled Distraction until you scale the duration on your tree a little bit more. Then in the Sigil of Power, you want to be using Magnified Area 2, Prolonged Duration 2 and Rapid Casting 2. The support gems in the Sigil of Power are just pure utility, and engraving them should be left for last. And then in Withering Presence, you want Prolonged Duration, and once you get the level 5 support gems, Chaos Mastery. And after getting your 60 Spirit from Act 3, you also want to be using Convalescence with Second Wind, Cooldown Recovery and Rapid Casting. Just use it whenever your energy shield is down and you are still in combat to recover it. Now let's talk about gear. ED Contagion is really good for leveling because you don't need good gear to progress. But that being said, knowing how to gear properly will really improve your single target damage and survivability. There are 2 extra things that you can do outside of the game to drastically improve the quality of your gear during leveling. The first one is using a proper Regex. Copy this string, which also will be found in the description, and then while looking for gear at the vendor, you can press Ctrl F and Ctrl V to paste this string into the search bar. This will highlight items with movement speed, maximum life, bonus level of skills, cast speed, increased spell damage, and increased chaos damage. The second thing you can do is to get a good loot filter that will, for example, highlight Withering Wand bases and Chiming Staves, so that you can guarantee having a constant supply of crafting bases and increase your chances at getting good modifiers on the right items by simply finding more of the items that you need. You can make your own loot filter by editing the filter file. You can use filterblade.xyz, or if you want to use my custom leveling filter, is available as an option for my Patreon supporters, and you will find a link to my Patreon in the description if you're interested. Now let's talk about what modifiers you want on your weapons, because weapon is by far the most important piece of gear. You need to keep looking for upgrades all the time and spend the majority of your currency to keep your weapon up to date. When it comes to modifiers, you want the following ones: either plus the level of all spell skills or plus the level of all chaos spell skills, increased spell damage, increased chaos damage, cast speed, and then less importantly mana or mana regeneration. In that order of importance, you want the stats on the weapon. And here are the item level requirements for different spell skill bonuses, so that you know when you can look for an upgrade, because you don't want to spend your currency if you cannot get a better bonus than you currently already have. And if you're using a wand, you'll also want to be using a focus. You can opt for a shield if you find yourself doing great single target damage but lacking survivability, but typically this build really needs the extra damage from a focus, so prioritize plus the level of all spell skills, increased spell damage, and increased chaos damage. When it comes to armor pieces, prioritize crafting boots until you have movement speed on them. Nothing else matters on boots during leveling. Of course, life attributes and resistances are always good to have, but you should highly prioritize MS. And here are the item level requirements for different movement speed bonuses on boots. You want to wear primarily energy shield gear because that will be the easiest to meet the attribute requirements since you will need mostly int. And if you can find hybrid energy shield and evasion or energy shield and armor pieces that you can equip, this will also help your survivability, especially early on before they become too irrelevant, since we are going to be scaling energy shield on our tree as our primary defensive stats. So make sure to wear decent bases that are close to your level. Life modifiers will also give you a lot of survivability, so look primarily for items with a maximum life, as much maximum life as possible, and then resistances and attributes, things like strength, dex, intelligence are also useful on suffixes, and remember that extra strength will also give you extra maximum life. Besides the regular defensive modifiers, on helmets you can also find the plus to the level of minion skills, which is useful really early to boost the levels of your unearth. But after Act 1 you should definitely prioritize the best defensive stats on your helmet over the levels of minion skill gems, as we will only use unearth in the first couple of acts. And jewelry is the hardest to upgrade as it drops in very limited amount and it's not widely available at the vendor. So make sure to learn all of the guaranteed jewelry drop spots during the campaign to increase your chances at getting a decent piece of gear. For example, you can find a guaranteed iron or lazuli ring at the cemetery, a guaranteed amulet in the Keth ruins, guaranteed resistance ring in the buried shrines, and then guaranteed ring in the sun-swept marsh in the hanging tree. So prioritize life and resistances, and if you get lucky you might also get extra offensive stats such as increased chaos damage on rings, increased cast speed on rings, or increased spell damage on amulets, or plus to the levels of all projectile skills on an amulet, which will boost the levels of your essence drain. Majority of your currency should be always spent on the gear slots that can increase your damage, so weapon, focus, rings, amulet, and you always want to think about what you're trying to get from your transmutes and augmentations, so don't just throw them on any random item that you find, try to be purposeful. For example, if you haven't found movement speed boots in the early game and you already have a decent weapon, you can spend augmentations on boots with good suffixes such as good elemental resistances and an open prefix so that you can fish for that movement speed prefix. Always take stock of your gear and try to figure out what's your weakest piece and work on upgrading that. When it comes to sockets and runes, you always want to be using the iron rune in your weapon to increase your spell damage, and then elemental and other runes can be spent in your other good gear pieces to boost your defensive stats. Now let's go over the passive tree progression. Initially you want to be pathing through these spell damage and minion damage nodes because we're going to be benefiting from both, pathing through the chaos damage into the potent incantation for increased spell damage. This is how we're gonna path in Act 1. Then we path for the increased duration and chaos damage. Increased duration is very useful on our build, and since we're going to be building mostly energy shield, we gotta start pathing for that. So we're gonna be getting a faster start of energy shield recharge. These three little nodes will basically cut your recharge time from 4 seconds to 3 seconds, so you will be having your energy shield available more often. And then we also want to pick up a few dexterity and strength nodes early on, with at least one int node pretty early so that we can get our higher level skills. I think for level 5 or level 6 skills you're gonna need some extra int. And you also adjust that based on your gear and also based on how many supports you have and how many strength and dex supports you're using. So you have to be a little bit flexible for that. Feel free to just go to the hooded guy and respec your points whenever you need to swap your attributes a little bit. It is very easy to meet the attribute requirements, but you might have to swap them a few times whenever you get different pieces of gear. After that, we are pathing straight up. We're skipping these nodes and we're skipping these chaos nodes for something that is a little bit more valuable and more powerful that we want to path to as early as we can, and that is the +1 to level of all chaos skills. This is super powerful, so I recommend rushing to this, as well as the skill effect duration, which will help you immensely to keep up with all of your skills at the same time on bosses. Then we're pathing for the wither effect, which is basically a multiplier to our damage, as well as extra chaos damage, and this node, the pure chaos, works mostly on hits, not on the damage over time, but it will work for our dark effigy and the hits from ED, so it will give you still a fair bit of damage, especially for the dark effigy. And we're also taking more faster start of energy shield recharge, and these nodes will basically cut it down to like 2 seconds or even less than 2 seconds. After that, you want to get some extra energy shield and a mana regeneration here, and then the chaos cluster as well as additional energy shield, and the 5% damage taken bypasses energy shield is going to be useful later on when we ascend. And then finally, at the end of the campaign, you also want to respec the beginning of your tree tree, because these nodes become very inefficient once you get a lot of increased damage, because they're only 8% and we're no longer going to be using minions at that point. So we want to basically pick these points here at the beginning for the energy shield and respec it as like you see on the screen, right? So these nodes are a little bit inefficient and these nodes are a little bit inefficient. So instead, we're going to respec here, pick up the cast speed or mana regeneration, but typically you shouldn't really need the mana regeneration early, but you can also grab it if you want. But it's slightly better to pick up this mana regeneration first, because this is only just 1 point. And that's how your skill tree should look like basically at the end of the campaign. Now let's talk about the ascendancy points. It's very, very straightforward in my opinion. I would always pick first the Eldritch Empowerment. I see a lot of people recommending first the Soulless Form, but you really don't have mana issues on this build. Even if you have a lot of +2 levels of skills, it will be very hard to run out of mana, especially just use your flasks and you'll be very, very it will be very, very easy to keep up with your mana. So I would recommend the Eldritch Empowerment for just 30% more damage on bosses, especially where your energy shield will be up almost all the time, because their attacks are much less frequent than whenever you're clearing, and then it's gonna be up like, I don't know, half the time or more than half the time while you're clearing. So it is still a very worth picking up for the extra damage. And then second ascendancy, I would go for the Soulless Form, which will give you more mana regeneration, and then third ascendancy, Eternal Life, which will then synergize with all of these modifiers that you have, where the damage taken bypasses energy shield, which basically means it's simply mitigated because your life cannot be changed. So the damage does not bypass anything, it's just negated. So that's what I would do for ascendancy in terms of the order. For the permanent bonuses, I would recommend in the Valley of the Titans picking 30% increased charm charges gained, so that you can activate your charms more frequently rather than having them available longer. You need them to be available more often so that you can prevent more stuns and more freezes and just more instances of damage and have them available whenever needed. In the Venom Crypt's Poison Vial, I recommend either increased elemental ailment threshold or increased stun threshold, whichever you prefer. I prefer the elemental ailment threshold because I want to mitigate the damage. I want the ignites, for example, to not be present on me so that I can recover my energy shield quicker. So I value the elemental ailment threshold, but the stun threshold is also really good to pick up. For the ancestral tattoos, you want to pick the resistances, because you will always need resistances, but you will not always need attributes. And then Goddess of Justice, I recommend the 30% increased mana recovery rate from flasks, because this build typically goes full ES later on, so you will not need the life recovery from flasks at all. It will be just useless. And then from Orbalas Pillar, just as everybody else, just pick increased movement speed. If you don't want movement speed for some reason, because you will be purely doing, I don't know, like rituals or something, then you can get like extra defense, like global defense or something, but you can change these pillars anytime you want. And at the end, I have an extra surprise for you. This guide is also available in a written version on Mobalytics, so you can find all of the gem setups, all of the gear explanations, the passive tree progression. You can just click on the link in the description and you will get all of this information in a written format. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and click the like button if you've learned something from this video, and I will see you next time. Take care.